Why do we use those things? Why do we need that in our lives? And what can it do for us? So I'll open it with a question to you guys. Why education? Why do you think we need education?
If you're not learning, you're not growing.
If you're not learning, you're not growing. I've heard that once or twice before.
Really, for me, education is exciting. You just learn, the more you learn, the more exciting your life can be.
The more you learn, the more exciting your life is.
As Jeannie always says, the more you learn, the more you earn.
The more you learn, the more you earn. Mm-hmm. That's nice. Jeannie DeWitt says it. I like that.
Here it goes. Oh boy.
So for me, I like BNI's core philosophy of lifelong learning. So if you look at the core values in the other room, there's 7. One of those is lifelong learning. I think there's a lot to be accomplished. There's a lot of growth that you can have as a person just by embracing that philosophy of lifelong learning. So everybody knows what CEUs are, right?
Yes.
Continuing education units. In what I'll call the real world, a CEU is typically 10 hours of education. How many is it in BNI?
1 hour.
1 hour. Makes it a little easier, I think, to get some CEUs under your belt. So keep that in mind as we go forward. Does anybody have CEUs that they have to do as a requirement for work? Good handful of people. It's kind of a trick question. Everybody technically has CEUs that they should do as a requirement for BNI. We're all in BNI. So there's a lot of things that CEUs can do. I have 4 that I've outlined. I'd like to start going over those with you. The first thing that I think education in particular can do for you is make you more relatable as a person. So for me, I tend to think I'm not that interesting of a person. Does anybody else have that, admittedly? Nobody? Just me? Okay. So if I'm at one-to-ones, especially when I first started one-to-ones, I always struggled. I didn't know what to talk about. I didn't know how to break the ice. But as I started learning more, I realized that those were the things that I could talk about. Those were the things that made me relatable in my one-to-one meetings. I've actually found, as I've done more meetings, that like a third of my one-to-one or a third of my business meeting, even if it's with a client, even if it's a meeting we have goals we have to hit by the end or else, at least a third of that meeting is unrelated to that topic. It's educational pieces. It's things that we find interesting as people. It's things that we relate to each other on different levels. So it makes you very, very relatable. It also helps me when I go to one-to-ones now, either get to know the person or find out more about them. So if I don't know the person already, and I have a lot of educational bits in my mind, or maybe some news stories that I think are appropriate in the business world, I'll talk to them a little bit about what I've heard or what I've learned. I'll say, hey, do you find this interesting? And based on their reactions, you can start to pin down what people are like. So you can talk to them about education. If you get a good reaction back from that, then they probably enjoy that topic, or they'll go on talking with you about that topic. And all of a sudden, your one-to-ones become more interesting and you become more relatable. And at the end, people will be more likely to say, oh, that was a good one-to-one, we should get together again. If I don't know the person, or that's if I don't know the person. If I do know the person, I'm a prepper. So if I know somebody, I know I'm going to have a one-to-one with them coming up, I use education as a tool to find topics to talk to them about. Because if I know them, I already sort of know what they like, what their preferences are. Do they like sports? Don't they like sports? And I keep that in my mind, and I take that into my one-to-ones, again, for the intent of being more relatable, because that way, when I get there, we can have a better and more interesting meeting. So overall, having education topics makes you a more relatable person. The second thing that I think education really does for people is it prepares you for other roles in a couple of ways, but one of the ways that it does that is it shows your commitment level. So in BNI, in life, in business, whatever it is, I said at the top, I feel that we can grow from education. And a lot of times, if you're trying to move up in pay, or you're trying to move up at your job to a new position, one of the things that they require is maybe a higher degree, maybe more experience on the job site, more experience in certain areas. So if you're looking to move up, if you're looking to better yourself, if you're looking to improve, education's a great way to do that. So I said in the last session, and for those of you that were here, I apologize for repeating it, but I feel it's very interesting. I read a book recently called The Slight Edge. Is anybody familiar with it? It's a really, really good book, and if you haven't read it, I strongly suggest it because it talks all about what your goals are, and more importantly, the difference between achieving those goals and not achieving those goals. And the difference, according to the book, is all the things that you're doing. So you're either looking at your goals, you're actively recognizing, hey, this is my goal, this is something I want to accomplish, and you're either working towards it in everything that you do, or working against it. So every single task, every single action that you take, it is either moving you toward your goal or moving away from your goal. I think that's important because if you're trying to move up and you're learning things, or maybe you're trying to think about what you should learn or what you should invest your time in, you should think, is this moving me toward where I want to be in my business? Is this moving me toward where I want to be in my BNI membership, or is it moving me away from it? Because obviously if it's moving you away, you don't want to waste your time educating yourself with those types of things. You want to spend the time that we have very little of as entrepreneurs typically, educating and doing things that are moving you towards it. And as far as the commitment piece that I mentioned, how many people are familiar with the Power of One report? Vast majority. So now it's no secret, right? Everybody can see on the Power of One report every week what your commitment level to BNI is. And what do you want people that look at that to think, when they go there? More importantly, and for me personally, I want to be one that people turn to if they're struggling. They say, hey, I'm not doing really well in this spot of BNI. How can I do better? I want them to look at how many CEUs I've done or other education that I've done and realize that I'm a good resource to come to so that I can help them, because I truly do enjoy helping people. So it can move you up and it can show your commitment to others. Both of those huge keys. The third thing I think it really does is provide some actionable items. So as I've said multiple times, I read a lot of books. I look at a lot of articles, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I was never that way when I was younger, even maybe 5-10 years ago. I told my parents, reading's stupid. I was like, I don't want to read. I had to read in high school books I didn't want to read. It was dumb. I've realized how naive I was, because all my education that I've read, I've personally taken the time. As I'm going through it, I like to take notes, and I can find an actionable item in almost any article that I've picked out to read. And I would strongly encourage you guys to do the same, because if you're reading something, you not just want to read it and bring it in. It might help you with those one-to-ones later, or with some of the other topics we've talked about, but you also want to take away something from it, and you want to do something because of it. So for example, I read an article the other day, and I struggle a lot with trying to prioritize work. Anybody else sort of struggle with that as entrepreneurs? I would come in the morning, I thought I was being so productive, I'd go straight to my email and I'd read it. And then I read a few articles, and that's probably the worst thing you could do. And I didn't agree right away, but it truly is, and I'll tell you why. So after I read this article, it said, if you go in and you're just reading emails, what are you really accomplishing? And what I was accomplishing was, I was figuring out what everybody else's priorities for my day was. I wasn't figuring out what my priorities for my day was. I was figuring out what everybody else thought was a fire, and not what I thought I should be doing, not what I thought was going to be productive, and what wasn't, again, going to move me towards my goals in BNI and in business. So I strongly encourage, as you're reading things, take notes. Or at least just try to find one actionable item, put it down in your phone, put it in a notification, something, and try to do something because of what you're reading. Don't waste those times that you have. As a result of that, I actually sort of trained my clients, I feel, because they know that if it's a priority, I still have a prioritization schedule, but they know that just because they've emailed me doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to get back right away. And that's actually helped me to prioritize my own day and the projects that we have so that we can be more productive overall. So kind of an interesting result of that. And last but not least, before we wrap up for some questions, I think the fourth thing that education really does for all of us is it gives us a fresh perspective, right? We're only one person. We can only experience so many things, but there's so many other people out there that have experienced more than us, that have done more things than us. And in my business and in everything that I do, I say I never want to be the smartest person in the room, because that means I can't learn anything, probably. I don't want to be the smartest person in my company. I always want people pushing me harder. I want to be learning more. But we're only one person, and we can only learn so much. So if we look at other people, we could potentially learn and take on their experiences. We could share education with each other, and we can, both of us, grow then from things that we know that they don't and things that they know that we don't. So I'll leave you with this example. I have two uncles, opposite sides of my family. My one uncle has been multiple C-level positions, made 7 figures a year at one of his jobs. He's done everything that you would think a business person would want to do. Been there, done that, been hired by the best, worked for the best. He's accomplished so much in his life, all sorts of awards, recognitions, things like that. Pretty cool, right? I have another uncle on my other side of the family. He started a business flipping houses. I'll tell you, he started in 2007. Okay? Not only that, but he got in business with a partner, and he doesn't share, but I will. His partner had some drug problems, had some other problems. Money started disappearing. And on top of that, then, it was 2007. The economy crashed. He ended up having to file bankruptcy. He's been through some horrible things in his life. Of those two uncles, which one do you think I've learned more stuff from?
And that struggle.
The second one, for sure. Because failure is an opportunity. There's all these sayings with Edison, he didn't fail, he just found 1,000 ways not to create a light bulb. From other people's failures, we can often find ways to not do things, obviously. We can find ways to speed up our lives, to make ourselves better quicker by saying, oh, that was kind of tried before in that situation, I probably shouldn't do that. So yeah, I've learned a ton more from my second uncle, and I strongly encourage you guys to not only talk to each other, but think about how education can make your lives better. Does anybody have any questions? We have a handful of minutes.